Everybody has superpowers, every single person in the world.
This is Noel from Tree Lady Talks. My superpower is I can talk in slow motion.
And I think mine is idea generation. Yeah, idea spaghetti coming. You've been with me sometimes, and it's like idea spaghetti, like Play-Doh. Like when I was a kid, I loved Play-Doh. My kids had Play-Doh. I used to make their own Play-Doh. And then I had something called a barbershop, or I've seen these barbershop Play-Dohs. And you push the Play-Doh in this looks like a minion or something, and you squeeze it up, then it all comes out like hair.
Just to let Play-Doh know, I don't want 2 tons of it through the post, okay? Please, I really don't. I can go backwards as well. Welcome to this episode of Tree Lady Talks, where Luke Faye, head of Tree Work Environmental Practice, interviews the Tree Lady. It's all gone backwards.
So welcome to this week's episode of Tree Lady Talks. Well, this is a bit different. I have a dear friend, Luke Faye, who is the Director of Tree Work Environmental Practice. Luke and I have been industry chums and actually real friends for quite a long time now. And we've shared all sorts of experiences. And I know I've gone to him for advice. But he said to me, you know what? I want to interview you. He thinks this is going to be a takeover. Well, we'll see about that, because I don't think anybody wants to hear about me. And this makes me, listener, feel really uncomfortable. But Luke, it's over
Sharon,
to you.
It's so good to see you. And I'm really excited and absolutely terrified to be doing this.
Yeah, so am I.
So we're in good company. Thank you so much for letting me interview you. This is a culmination of a couple of thoughts. I've only recently got into podcasts, listening to podcasts, and one of the areas I've been listening to a lot about is board governance, and I follow a couple of self-proclaimed board governance geeks, and I heard one of them, Paul Smith, being interviewed by the other, Matt Fulbrook, some time ago, and it just suddenly occurred to me, Sharon does these fabulous podcasts, but wouldn't it be great to hear about Sharon on one of her podcasts? And so I phoned you up, and you, as always, just said yes, which is a fabulous trait of yours. Thank you so much.
Yes, I do say yes. I do say yes to a lot of things and think about it afterwards. But right, so apologies, listener. Here we go.
So this is, I think, 120th podcast. You started about 4 years ago with the great John Parker, and since then you've been interviewing the gods and the gremlins of arboriculture and urban forestry, and they're a fabulous podcast that you've produced. How did you get into that?
Well, when lockdown started, it was all a bit scary, and I was doing lots of gardening, creating a veg patch, and I needed to divert my mind, so I got even more into podcast listening than I did before. And I really like well-being podcasts. That's what I go to, and Dr. Rangan Chatterjee, and lots of inspirational, you can change your life, you can do it. And I thought, I love a chat. And I love asking questions. So I thought about it. And then I thought, oh, God, no, who am I to do this? Oh, no, I'm not good enough. Oh, no, people will laugh. I'm sure they do, actually. And but the thought wouldn't go away. So I thought about it in June 2020. I thought, oh, no. And then one day I just woke up and thought, screw it, let's do it. So I contacted John. But can I just say, none of this is possible without my darling Noel. So Noel has got a great career in the music industry in the past, in the 80s, and he's always been interested in sound engineering. And so he had the gear and he had the knowledge. So without him, none of this would happen. And we've really enjoyed, we're not doing quite so much of it now, and I want to get back to it, Noel joining in with some of the really funny sketches, the musical interludes, and he is massively creative. And so to see him in a way within our business, although this isn't within our business, but to see him professionally being so imaginative and creative has been wonderful. And I know that when I started off podcasting, I was very nervous about stepping out of line, about being too weird, not being myself. But as I've got older and I've done it more and more, I'm just more myself, and it just feels like, well, really, it's my
Wow.
favourite thing that I do. I mean, I would really like to talk to people and listen to people all day long, every day, because people
So
fascinate
that's,
me.
I mean, it comes through in your podcasts beautifully, and also actually in, you know, as you said, we've known one another for a long time, and you know, and your engagement with the whole of our profession uh, re- resonates with that characteristic of, you know, being interested in people and being, you know, being uh, having open ears to hear what people have to say. It's, and that, yeah. So you've managed to channel that great quality into something that that is shared with many people, and it brings me to my next question, which is about your preparation for podcasts. I've got a lot of questions about podcasts coming up. So
I'm in my comfort
because
zone with these questions, so that's okay. I'm good with
oh,
these
lovely.
questions.
So it's maybe a false sense of security for the moment, but so do you tend to prepare for a long time ahead for your podcast, or do you wing it on the day?
Oh, come on, Luke. You think you know. Well, if there's a book, which I'm very privileged because I've now got to the stage where publishers send me books for me to read, readers' copies, and say, would you like to interview this author? Which is always an enormous privilege to read a book and then talk to the person who wrote it. So if there's a book, I do genuinely read it. I don't read it too early because then I'll move on and forget it. I'll scribble notes in it. And then I will do a bit of research. So if it's an author, I will do a bit of an internet search, and I will also listen to other interviews that they've conducted. So then I also pick up other ideas as well. So often if I'm driving to site or something like that, I'll search that person's name, and then I think, oh yes, this, that, and the other. But it is all quite last minute. It's quite intense. I have learned to read quicker, and it has honed my reading skills and my analysis skills. And sometimes I can really enjoy the book, but I think, how can I draw something out of this? And other times, it's really easy to draw obvious questions. So it's quite variable. So for non-authors, which is probably most of my interviewees, then if I don't know them already, I'll do a little bit of a search about them. And then I will roughly, on one sheet of paper, jot down some ideas. Now, occasionally, I have in the past think, and I must be more formulated about this, and I must write down all of my questions in order, and then I will read out the questions. But that I found that made for a stilted interview for me. So I need to be fairly creative, and then the interviewing process itself is really, really interesting because it's all done remotely. We'd rather it wasn't, but we don't earn anything from this podcast. It costs us money, and so I haven't got the time to sort of go and drive and meet everybody, you know. So, but you can make a real connection. There are some interviews that I've done, but it's been really quite magical and quite powerful, and I've never seen that person before, and then they enter the virtual room and then bang. That's a funny thing, isn't it, about virtual meetings, is that you just suddenly with these people, we've got used to it now, but in real life you'll sort of open the door, you'll saunter up, then you'll get this sort of animal sense of who that person is. But so somehow you have to draw out that 3 or 4 dimensional relationship with somebody on a 2-dimensional format. And so It's
Yeah,
about energy, I think.
yeah,
And can I be honest? No, sometimes it doesn't happen.
of course.
And sometimes interviewees have more to say than others. And it can be really, occasionally it can be quite difficult, but mostly it's the most natural thing in the world.
Wow. Then sounds okay. So I I think you've kind of answered several of my other questions here. So it seems like you do stalk people a little bit,
Yes,
as
you
I
have to.
did,
Yeah.
and it seems like you do sometimes prepare a bit of a script, but actually that's not really your style. Um, and so the other element then, which I think is, you know, really tricky, and I've listened and I really admire what you do with this, but how do you find that sense of presence of mind, I guess, to follow the threads that arise out of an interview and kind of spark your inquisitiveness?
There's a lot of paddling beneath the surface. So I'm mostly listening really intently in the present. Sometimes I'm completely swept away and there's nothing else but to be in the present. But at the same time, a little tiny corner of my mind, I mean, I've no idea how I'm doing, what the professionals do. I'm not a professional person. But in the corner of my mind, I'm thinking, oh, I could draw out on that point. I could draw out on that point. And so I wait for that person's flow to finish. Most of the time, sometimes I interrupt really rudely. And then I go, can I go back to that point? And then I'll relate it to something that I've done or someone else has said and try and bring it back. And so there is that sort of backpedaling going
Yeah,
on. So it's not always just flow.
yeah.
But yeah, I would say it's it's work. Yeah.
That's brilliant. So, so I was going to ask, but it's pointless now. How many questions you normally have, just to check whether I've got enough for you? But I'm well aware that that's not where we're at. So, I just one of the things I wanted to find out from you is what's the most striking things that you've learned from podcasting?
That everything is connected.
Yeah,
That every subject, every theory, every body, we're all connected. Nature is connected, people are connected, ideas are connected. And I think that sometimes we forget that and we plough on our own sort of furrow, our own perhaps gloom and misery. But actually, there are so many common themes. I mean, I've also interviewed some brilliant marine biologists as well. And I've interviewed artists, general environmentalists, real tree geeks, people in a position of power, children, and there's all common themes. We're all one. I'm such a hippie. I've got more and more hippie-ish and woo-woo as I've gone on. So that's the most striking thing. It's all connected.
and and so those connections. It seems to me that it's your mind that's drawing those connections and sparking off. I want to speak to this person. I want to speak to that.
Yes. Yes.
Where do you find the people to speak to? How do you? I mean, some of them it's obvious, but there's lots of
Yes.
people that's not so obvious.
Generally, it just comes to me in an impulsive flash. I'm sorry, that's just the truth. I mean, I
Doesn't
read,
surprise me at all.
I do read a Sunday paper, and that will sometimes give me an idea. And sometimes I'll see something on LinkedIn. And just last week, or a few days ago, I just put something on LinkedIn and have some ideas. But only sort of because I wanted to engage with the audience. I've actually got a stack of ideas, but they're not necessarily right. So I thought, what does the audience want to hear? And if we had more time, I'd love to do more documentary style podcasts like we used to in lockdown. whereby I'll have a subject and I'll get lots of different strands to do that. So one of my favourites was Conquer's Not Concrete, which I'm afraid to sound a total narcissist, which I'm not, but it was one of our projects where we've been able to save a tree for the developer, and the developer wanted to keep it and the local authority didn't. And we worked with the pressure group and we used technology. The reason why that was one of my favourites was because there were so many different types of characters. If you think of it as a film, characters within that podcast. We had the developer, the local authority didn't want to engage. We had some scientific expertise, and we had the protesters who were brilliant, including some of the children. And I love that sort of 360. And that's what I'd like to do a bit more, really. Should I have some more time and we could afford it.
To curate that in such a way to kind of bring it full circle, or do you now flow freely?
Yeah, I love that. I mean, honestly, Luke, if I could do that on so many different subjects. So one of the things that's come out of the LinkedIn post was something I was thinking about, was neurodiversity in arboriculture. And so I'm trying to find a psychotherapist who works with neurodivergent people in different occupations. So I'm trying to find somebody who can speak to me about that, and then to have various members of our arboricultural community talk about their own experience. I'll talk about mine as well, and then pull that together, and maybe an employer. So that I love that sort of looking at everything from one thing from different angles.
Absolutely. You know, when the London Tree Officers Association Diversity and Inclusion Working Party, we did a study of tree officers, and the report for both London and then the one that was subsequently done for the nation, both show that there's a higher proportion than you'd find in ONS studies of people in tree officer roles who identify as neurodivergent.
No, I think it's absolutely wonderful, really, because we're all meant to be here, aren't we, with our special characters and gifts and differences.
Yeah, turns out to be a welcoming home for people.
Yeah, definitely.
So I love how you work with social media and just across communities generally, sharing knowledge, but also inquiring about knowledge. And the post you put out last week was a great example of that you just mentioned. What channels do you tend to use for communicating across?
To be honest, Luke, only LinkedIn and podcasting, because I was finding with Instagram, and I used to use Facebook, it just took too much time, and I've got very little time because I'm working full time and all the other things to do with life, which I enjoy. So I just do that. And I'm quite sure that some people would say you're really limiting yourself and you should be out there more, but I'm just not comfortable with it. I'm fundamentally quite private, which is a real contradiction, but I've heard other people who do things in the public domain say that actually they're quite private people. So I never share anything. I know that other people, when I was on Facebook, people put photographs of them and their family and everything like that. I just think, number one, who's interested? It embarrasses me to put anything about my personal life out there. So I've always kept it really just professional. Yeah.
And how do you find LinkedIn for that?
I think it's brilliant. Yeah. And also I can dip in and out of it as well, you know. So and I find it really good.
Do you get caught in that kind of I don't know, when you put a post out, that desire to just check on it regularly, those little packets of endorphins that come every time there's a few likes and stuff?
Yes, I do, which is one of the reasons why I post in flurries. And then I won't post again for a while, partly because I'm either doing other things, but I don't have it on my phone. So I don't have
Yeah.
any social media at all on my phone, apart from, well, WhatsApp. I mean, that's
Yeah.
busy enough. But no, so I don't look. So if I'm in the office, I do struggle with my concentration is either deeply intense, like hyper focus, or it can be a bit scattery. I mean, I have not had a diagnosis of ADHD simply because I haven't been, but I have got a diagnosis of dyslexia, and I know that they're often the same. And my daughter, who is very knowledgeable about these things, and someone else, a dear friend of mine, says you've definitely got ADHD. But I see it as a superpower because I can just spark off ideas, and so the least distractions I have, like social media around me, the better. Otherwise, I'd never get any work done. What about you, Luke?
In terms of LinkedIn or
Yeah,
getting work?
no, in terms of social media and being diverted by it when you shouldn't be.
So, yeah, LinkedIn for work. I don't connect with anyone from work on other social medias
No,
platforms, and I'm not that interested in them at the moment.
no.
That's but uh, but for on LinkedIn, then I take a while to kind of craft a post and put it up, and it's one of my challenges to myself is then to leave it alone, and I need to learn that because I have other things to do like
Yeah,
you,
I know. I bet you
and
do.
but those little packets of endorphins are
Yeah,
addictive, and
yeah.
that just checking and seeing if things, if it's getting out to lots of people and people are engaging with it, um, is I find stupidly exciting, and I would
Well, we all
uh,
do, don't we? And that's why it's designed like that, isn't it? And I'm
yeah,
also awful at checking the podcast Buzzsprout and looking at stats on that as well. I'm dreadful.
really
Yeah, of course I
that's
am.
cool.
And I know that everybody is who does a podcast,
Yeah,
and yeah, I know that you are a deeply reflective person who thinks about things quite deeply and carefully, crafts what they're going to say or write. I'll just get it done. I'm doing it now. I've just had an idea. Oh, I've done it. It's off. So reflection is something I need to learn.
really though, do you really need to learn it?
No, I don't. Oh, in my sort of
Well,
paid reporting and consulting world, I'm very careful. But in my sort of creative world, which is sort of having ideas and podcasting, and I do intend to write a book. I know exactly what I'm going to write, and I've got some ideas, and yeah, I am committed to doing it. So I'm saying it publicly now because that's the way I roll. If I'll say
you
it
heard it here
publicly,
first, right?
but yeah, because I haven't got the time to do it, but I will be given the time if it's meant to happen. So I've made a start, and it will be on. It's a non-fiction book, so in my creative world, I'm quite instinctive and impulsive. I think a lot of people are, aren't they, who do this sort of thing?
Yeah, it's yeah. And do you want to say any more about the book?
It's going to be about trees and people and how we need each other.
Wonderful, fabulous. Okay, and that's a
That's
and
enough
that's
said. I've gone quiet, you see, because I don't want to say any more.
I appreciate that. So like, the opportunity, but not
Yeah,
push you in case you really didn't want to talk about
yeah.
it. So, um, but that's a thread that's come through all the work that you've done and everything. You mentioned superpowers, and it was one of my questions for you, which is, what is your superpower?
Everybody has superpowers, every single
Uh-huh.
person in the world. And I think mine is idea generation. Yeah, idea spaghetti coming. You've been with me sometimes, and it's like idea spaghetti, like Play Doh. Like when I was a kid, I loved Play Doh. My kids had Play Doh. I used to make their own Play Doh. And then I had something called a barbershop, or I've seen these barbershop Play Dohs. And you push the Play Doh in this sort of, looks like a minion or something, and you squeeze it up, then it all comes out like hair.
Yeah.
And that I always think of as like his ideas coming out the top of heads. It's almost like,
Yeah.
um,
I'm
okay,
picturing it right
yeah,
now.
like this. And it's like, oh, and that connects to that, and that connects to that, and that connects to that. I can see just loads of connections all at the same time, and it can be a problem in meetings. So I attend a lot of design team meetings in my work as an arboricultural consultant. So for those who aren't familiar with it, there'll be engineers, architects, a client who might be a builder. These are big schemes, like huge schemes in London. Landscape like me, the ecologists, project managers, and then they'll be talking about something. And I'm not particularly intelligent. I didn't do particularly well at school, but I'm a fast thinker, and so they'll be saying something, and I've learnt to control myself and not to keep putting my virtual hand up and going, yeah, so if we did that, we could do that, and then that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and that, and doop, 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 doop. And I have to just slow it all down and behave. So,
Do you find you're tempted to interrupt quite a lot in the
yeah, but I
meetings?
don't, because I've learned, I've controlled that impulse.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I used to when I was younger. And I used to, why can't I just, so and often, my ideas are often not good. They're not all right. Luke, they're just ideas. They might be rubbish ones. And often I'll make a fool of myself.
So if you could choose a superpower, what would that be?
Oh, gosh. That's a really good question. What would it be? So many, actually. Well, I feel really blessed in my life, actually. I'm in a really good place now. So I suppose it would be to be slightly less impulsive. But that's not a superpower. That's not answering your question. That's saying I'm identifying a character weakness in me and wishing that weren't so. I'd like to ask Noel, really, what he thinks my superpower should be. No, I can't think of it. What would your superpower be, Luke?
Well, uh, when when I used to do a lot more drinking than I do at the moment, it would have been the ability to realise I was drunk and be able to say, you know what, sorry for whatever I've just said, but I just realised I'm really drunk and I'm just going to take myself out of this
Yeah.
situation. But now, if I could have a superpower, oh God, I don't really know. I think um, if I could have real clarity of thought,
Yes, that would be a really good one.
you
Yeah.
know,
I,
do things once, remember them clearly, and have an absolute clarity of recognition of thought. You know, rather than what I get is quite, as you said, I'm reflective, lots of
yeah.
musing.
Yeah, no, but I think that is really useful. Perhaps mine might be that I would be forever present whilst being grounded in the past and thinking of the future. And I think I mostly am present now. I'm a lot more present now than I was when I was younger. And I am constantly put too much in my life because I'm greedy for life. Like, I'm out or had people round every night this week and at the weekend. And all of it's just lovely local stuff. Most of the
Yeah,
things I'm doing are with no more than 6 miles radius of my house, if not within my house. So that's my social life, and I've got into fitness a lot more as
wonderful.
well, which I'm loving. I've got the most brilliant social life in the village here. We've made such good friends. It's brought me such joy. I'm really close to my family, my lovely children. I'm going to be a granny. Oh
Congratulations.
my God, I'm so excited in a few weeks' time. So that's very important to me. I've got elderly parents. And then I've got my work life, which is huge. I happen to be married to the long-suffering Noel, and I've got 2 beautiful golden retrievers. Gardening is like a massive thing for me, and reading, and dancing, and what else?
Any particular dancing?
Oh, crazy dancing. Like tonight, sorry, podcast listeners are not going to be interested in this, but I'm just going to tell you because you're asking. Where I live in rural Suffolk, in a nearby small town, once a month they have a ladies only disco for an hour and a half, finishes at 9. No booze, no blokes. It's £8. You go in there
And
with your mates and you dance your head off. And the ladies of a certain age, mostly, there are some younger ladies, and it's just silly dancing. We just like comedy dancing.
absolutely wonderful. And
No, really, people have
I'll
turned off
never
by.
be able to listen to one of your podcasts again without imagining you dancing whilst asking questions.
Yeah, definitely. No, I dance at home with the dogs as well. Now, this is because I know now that nobody's listening. So you can, because nobody, this is Tree Lady Talks, not Tree Lady goes on and on about her life. And I've had plenty of difficulty in my life, listeners. I'm just going to say that. I have. It's not been a bed of roses at all.
You've brings me right on actually to your journey to here.
Okay.
So you've had more than one career. You've brought up wonderful children. You've done a tremendous amount. Can you give us an insight into your journey to the red chair you're in now?
Okay. The red chair, by the way, for those of you watching on YouTube on Tree Lady Talks video podcast channel, the piffily named, is one of my many secondhand cheap bargains. So I'm a real secondhand rose. So I'm an only child and I grew up in a village and I love nature. So you hear this over and over again. It's almost yawn, another tree person grew up liking nature. And I was going to be an astrophysicist. And so I was mad keen. I wanted to be different, Didn't do very well at school at all. And it was a bit of a naff comprehensive. But I got an offer to read Physics of Astrophysics. And then I missed my place by 1 ucker point, as they were then. And the world had ended because I really wanted to leave home and be independent. And the last minute, I got into a place to do geography and landscape studies. Loved that, mid-80s. And then I went to work for a local authority where I met my first husband and worked there and did some community tree planting. I was really fired up in wanting to make a difference. And the local authority was a very small rural authority, and they hadn't really heard of anybody doing this, but they were great, and politically it looked good for them. So I had quite a lot of political support within the authority, and I planted about 6 community woodlands with schools, and this is in the early 90s, late 80s, early 90s, and it was kind of like, oh, God, it's a bit scary, but you know what, it's good, and I can still drive round and see those, and I love working with the children and different community groups. And I also learnt a lot about trees. Being a tree officer is about people, not trees. And it was complicated, and had a big legal case as well where I prosecuted a woodland owner, and it was very, very involved. And then I had 7 years off being a full-time mum and had a little face painting business, but still did some environmental community work. And then I went back to work part-time for another urban local authority. And it was at that time that a former colleague, who was very important in my life, said to me, you are really quite strange, and I think you are dyslexic. So that local authority paid for me to have a dyslexia test at 38. And that was really useful because by then I'd started the level 4 in arboriculture, which changed my life. And I've said this before so many times, Andy Summerlee from Tree Life was instrumental in my life change. I had very low self-esteem. I'd never achieved anything very much at all, apart from bringing up my lovely children. And I had a very low opinion of myself, felt very suppressed, very poorly paid, and felt that I really wasn't very good at anything. And so to be able to suddenly think, wow, I can actually do this, was a shock. And that course showed me the whole of the pie. I mean, I was married at that time to my lovely ex-husband, who I'm good mates with, who'd always worked in local government. And so I'd only really known local government and contracting from just letting those contracts at the former place. And I just realised there was so much more to it. And I was working as a tree officer on a massive hospital project where I met all of these fantastic contracting people and architects. And I thought, this is really buzzy, man. I really love this. And I just felt really drawn to it. And towards the end of that course, I was out on sites and I stopped in a car park just to sort of work out where I was going, because I was a late adopter of everything, like mobile phones and sat-navs and everything. Where am I going next? And then I just had this sort of flash knowing of, is this the rest of my life? Going to do another TPO? This doesn't feel right. And I impulsively phoned up a contractor friend. And I spoke to my then husband as well. And he said, oh, no, just stick with what you've got. But they did encourage me in the end. So I then went to work for a contracting firm to manage their tree gang. And I was useless because I was so excited about being not in local government. And I just mothered these boys. You know, hot chocolate, listen to their love life. I lapped it up. And I'm sort of, yeah, have this kit, have that kit. All you've got to do are your risk assessments. I really wasn't very good. But that was 2005, and the latest iteration of the BS 537 came out, and there was a market, more of a market for tree reports. And this contractor had really good connections in the construction industry. So I started doing consultancy. Long story short, he made me MD of a new company, and we ended up employing up to 20 arboriculturalists, ecologists and landscape architects, which is when I got to know you. And during that, I did that for 10 years. And during that time, the employer was very generous, and I was able to get my professional memberships. And I started working on the council for the Institute of Chartered Foresters. And we got Tree Radar. And Tree Radar wasn't my idea. It was someone else's, someone who worked for us at the time. And I felt so guilty. A lot of my life was been about guilt, unnecessarily and unfounded. I felt so guilty that the employer had spent this money on this piece of kit. I thought, I've got to really learn this. I can't let him down. And that was my motivation. And then I got into it. And then I thought, how am I going to do this? And so I started putting myself around with this pram so that people knew it existed and what it could do. And I sort of dived deep into it with the inventor. And that kind of got me into public speaking. And also the fact that I had a very unusual, that hospital I mentioned earlier, I won a 10-year contract to manage their woods for the community. And I worked with MenCap and all sorts of things. It was just amazing. So those things got me out speaking. I also learned that I actually was growing this business. Somehow, like the first time that we employed people, which was after about 6 months, and they turned up, an ecologist and a arboriculturalist, and I was terrified because it was on a really strange farm in rural Essex, and it was a contractor's yard there. It was a bit, well, it was not a professional environment, but it was brilliant. And I thought, my God, they've come here, and I was really nervous. I thought they're going to find me out. I'm just a silly girl. I'm a silly girl on a farm in Essex. God, what can I do? And then the next day, oh my God, they've come back. You know, that's what I thought about myself. And anyway, they came back and more came, and they came back too every day, and so it went on. So highs and lows there. Great highs and lows, some of which you know about. Some of which are really quite major highs, major lows. And I left there because I just had a growing sense of needing to do my own thing. And let's say many things in my life changed in 1 year, big time. In fact, my whole life. And other than my profession. So I left there, I had a break for an operation, and then I set up my own practice. And now I've been going now for 10 years. And I carried on with the Institute and ended up being their president for 2 years, which is an enormous honour. And carried on with the public speaking, but I just feel that the industry needs to continue to evolve, and I'm still really, really passionate and feel that the whole development industry needs to evolve and more community focus and obviously more environmental focus. But I spoke to Professor Chris Baines earlier today, and what I really admire, one of the things I really admire about him is that he's a passionate environmentalist, and he's gone to places that you wouldn't think an environmentalist would be welcome. And he's made it his business and his mission to go in and change things from the inside. And that's really what I'm trying to do, with some success and some failure, to change the culture of some of the development practices from the inside. And I say it's been a mixed experience, but mostly positive. And I think if occasionally I lose that because we're human and we're jaded and life stuff happens and it's really tricky. But I think that we need to remain true to why we're doing this in the first place and not to get caught up in processes. And I think that a lot of our professional businesses have necessarily become very process-led. You know, those of us who work on big projects know there's many different sort of document sharing systems and protocols, and all of that is necessary. But I don't think that is not the point of us. They're just tools. The point of us is to achieve that something good, something better, that connectivity. So, yeah, daily grapple, really. What are your thoughts, Luke? I've gone on then.
Sharon, I just want to thank you for sharing your story. I think that would be so inspirational to so many people. So really thank you so much for sharing that. And obviously I resonate greatly with that feeling of not being good at some stuff.
Yeah.
I look back on so much of my professional career with like, what the hell did I think I was doing?
Yeah.
But when we realize we're not good at something and we start learning how to do it, that's when change happens very often. So, and you mentioned being true to our reason for doing what we do, and how do you remind yourself of that true north for you?
I think that it's something that we have to look at every single day in our lives. And sometimes, as I say, life takes over. Personal matters, intense workloads, and it's about reflection, really. And I think it's when something feels icky. Like, I spoke to somebody on the phone today, a project I'd worked on a few years ago, and it was a medium-sized project, and I was waiting in the wings to be called back to site. It didn't happen. I knew there'd been staff changes, and I thought, well, maybe it's gone off the boil. And then a year later, they came back to me and said, can you sort out this bit of thing? And I said, well, what about the other big thing that I was meant to supervise? And they said, I'm sorry, it was overlooked. And I said, well, what about the other thing in the other part of the site? And they said, oh, they're doing that now. And I said, I'm going to withdraw because I feel professionally compromised. And I think it's, I'd like you to go to someone else. So that is a situation where I will say no, because I couldn't help them with what had been gone. They weren't asking for my help for what had happened. It was just another situation that had arisen. And I thought, I don't want to serve somebody who doesn't actually listen to what I've said.
Yeah.
And there are other projects where I've gone and looked at them, but I've become much more finely attuned on that in the last few months, particularly, of just saying, I'm out, and here's why. Or you need to do this and need to do that. But that takes a lot of professional confidence to do that based on experience. But
Absolutely does. And I found myself in that situation, and also having to represent the consultants that work in tree work, saying, stepping in and saying to whoever it is who's been trying to push them to do something that compromises their professional integrity.
yes, yes.
You can't do this.
No.
And and if that's the kind of person you want to represent you, then I'm sure there's someone else out there who can do it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think we have to say that as professionals, and many arboriculturists have plenty of work at the moment, and so that affords us to do that. But can I go back a little bit? I'm sorry, because this is you interviewing me, but you thank me for sharing my life story. I say, well, it's nothing much. But actually, I do think I've always been very openly vulnerable. And I do think there's a real strength in that. And that seems to be the way society's moving, which I really welcome. That people are more open and more vulnerable, whereas 10, 15 years ago, people wouldn't be at all. They had to be seen to be smashing it in life. But let's face it, we're all just muddling our way through, aren't we?
Yeah, I sometimes think, I sometimes think, yes, I feel confident to be like that, but then I think, oh yeah, but then I'm, 53, and so it's taken, maybe that's not such a big deal, because if I was still in my 20s, I'd still be putting a front on.
Good point. Good point. Because I was 57 yesterday, so
congratulations.
yeah. So I think it has come easier with age. Yeah.
But I do, maybe someone younger can give a different perspective on this now. But I do think part of our role, and something you do brilliantly in the profession and industry as a whole, is to create spaces where people can feel comfortable to be honest and vulnerable, and that's our duty now.
It is, because it's our family.
Yeah.
It's our wonderful mixed family of great people, and that's the way I've always seen the industry. And that's why I found it incredibly painful when there's been family discord and taking it too deeply, too personally. I have, by my therapist I went to see for a year or so, who was wonderful fairly recently, she said, you are a highly sensitive person. And I really feel that sometimes. So, so I just thought I'd put myself out there as a highly sensitive person, set myself up to pain. Because in the interest of the family, really, that's what it's about.
Absolutely. And you really, you embrace the whole profession, and I absolutely.
So do you, Luke. Backwards to you the whole time.
Oh, thank you.
It's a love-in, folks.
I'm going to go off piece now, and I'm going to ask you, and I'll borrow a cultural question.
Oh God, I might not be able to answer it.
No one can.
Oh, so, okay. Thank God for that.
That's the punchline. How do you attribute age class to a tree?
Oh, okay. Nice one. Well, size relative to species and environment is probably the thing that pops into my head. But not always, because some trees just stand still. Like some trees that I can think of look exactly the same. There might be, often if they're planted trees in a street, that's a fairly typical scenario because, I mean, they've been planted really badly, say, in the 90s, and they're just the same size as when they were planted, and yet they're alive.
Yeah.
So I suppose that's, size.
Those are 90 bad planting. It's
Yeah,
like
there's loads of 90s
an
back
acronym,
planted.
isn't it?
Yeah, yeah. So I suppose size relative to species, relative to environment, based on your own
Yeah.
experience. What do you say? How would you define it?
This is the thing. When we were working on the tree data standard, I had to say to all the scientists involved and academics, yeah, don't bother writing this is. I mean, let's start. What's a
Yes.
semi-mature tree? Is it semi-mature from a nursery?
Yeah.
Is it pre, before it's sexually mature? Is it just one that's maybe a couple of meters tall?
Yeah.
And we start there and we move on.
Well,
What's
you
an
know
early
what?
mature?
That's the age class I find hardest. It's funny you should say that because I go semi-mature, and when I'm doing a survey, so I don't speak like that in voice when I'm doing a survey, but I might do actually if I go really mad. But yeah, I rarely put young unless it's really young. But actually, I did think the other day, no, actually, you know what? That's a young tree. So I
Yeah.
find that one really, really hard. Can I ask you about surveying? Because even though you're MD of a large company, I think you still do some surveying, don't you?
I'm afraid so.
Yeah, that's exact. Thank you for answering your question. I
As
didn't
you
even need to
said,
ask a question. You've just said, I'm afraid so. So I know how you feel.
so what was it you said the other day? You in one of your podcasts, you said I like to every now and then get out there and change the beer barrel.
Yes,
Um,
yes.
so-
Well, I do a lot of beer barrel changing now. I mean, now I'm self-employed and I don't use, I rarely use subcontractors, and I've chosen not to have staff. Noel and I work together. And so I do a lot of surveying, and I go through waves of enthusiasm about it and ways of coping with that. But it is the most important thing that we do.
Mm,
Well, is it the most?
yeah.
It's one of the most important things that we do because we've got to get the data right. The
Well, it's
data is
where
the
we apply
data.
our cultural knowledge.
Yes, yes. But
Right.
then the rest of it is communication. It's
Exactly. And
all
it's about
about
people.
communication, whether it be written, verbal, um, in a meeting, body language. It's all communication, and we're there to serve our clients by telling it to them straight in a way they can understand and helping them. It doesn't mean they're gonna like what we say.
Indeed. And you said it at the beginning when you were talking about, your role in local authority.
Mm.
It's not about the discipline, it's about the people.
Yeah.
Um,
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, you've captured that so well. Yeah, so yeah, you was asking if I survey. I do. As you know, I was on site today, but that was site supervision. But part of that is, as you mentioned, you know, companies up in arboriculture have a lot of work on, and we all have to roll our sleeves up and change the
Yes.
beer barrel.
Absolutely. No, it's really important because that's where you learn. I find that the building sites, which are nearly always a total joy and the best part of my job, are also the part of my job where I do the most learning
Yeah,
and the most teaching. It's a
yeah,
real, I have a really good relationship with many of the construction sites that I go on. Because they're big sites, it'll be the same, it's often the same team for years. I know everything about that site manager's family, and he knows
well,
everything about mine. But it doesn't mean to say that I'm going to go, yeah, it's all right, it's all right. But yeah, I'm still there to do a job, and I've learnt to really respect a good site manager. It's one of the hardest and most misunderstood jobs in the world because people universally dislike builders if they don't know what they do. And there have been some shocking building sites I've been on, which are shameful. But the professionally run ones, um, they're generally really organised, and they just want to understand how to do the right thing. They don't have a clue, and I think that is one of the problems, is that we as arboriculturists should be invited into various educational establishments where they're teaching construction management, I met, I went to a building site in Camden the other day, a really well-run one where they need some advice on trees, and that's what I'm there to do. Really great professional team in the office, and I met a lovely young lady. It was her first day as an intern, and she's training to be a civil engineer, and she was absolutely charming, but she'd never been taught anything. She was just entering her second year. She hadn't been taught about trees at all, and we had a really great conversation. And I said, well, make a note of my name and tell your lecturer, because if you can just all go in, like just one school or just one college, and just go and speak to them for, even if it's half an hour. I know you're a great advocate of this, Luke. You do brilliant work with STEM. Then I think that we can just open the mind, and we can have our mind opened by what they need.
Yeah. And people are very receptive. I mean,
Yeah.
It's a cliche, but people love trees, and
Yeah, they
they
do.
are receptive, really receptive.
Yeah.
What do you think makes a good site manager?
One who is having to deal with a multiple range of tasks any one time: personnel, health and safety, operational, and in terms of what we do, willingness to listen and take action quickly, and to pick up the phone and communicate to us, oh, we're coming up now to do that bit of drainage. I'm giving you a week. Sorry, this is almost fantasy. So I've gone off to the realm of fantasy now. Oh, look, we need to do the drainage in 2 weeks' time. I remember in 7.2 of the arboricultural method statement, which is on my wall, there's a tree protection plan on my wall with the timetable next to it. I need to call Sharon, the tree lady. Oh, I'll give her plenty of notice, and then everybody will be ready on time, and the ladies' loos won't be locked, and we will all work marvellously in accordance with the method statement. Okay, it can happen, it does happen, but normally it's like, all right, how you doing? Yeah, we're digging this hole tomorrow, and that's, oh well, it can all go so horribly wrong.
Oh God, yeah. I mean, we
Yes,
yeah.
yes,
You do great accents. Does your internal monologue have different accents?
yes. I'm a frustrated actress. Yeah, no, I really am. And Noel is a great voiceover guy. And no, I could just be as theatrical as you like. I just have to hold that bit in. There's bits of me that I held back, obviously, just to try and be normal in a professional world.
It's always a challenge.
Yeah.
And I think people in arboriculture kind of have to make an extra effort because
Yes.
everyone thinks,
Yes.
God, it's the weird tree people.
Yeah, exactly. Do you know, I think for me personally, I can only speak for myself, it's been easier being a woman because they tend to remember me as a woman going on a site rather than another bloke. So I think it makes you more memorable. Now, I fully hear other women's experiences have not been positive, and believe me, I've had my time of receiving sexism and difficulty in that, but mostly it makes me more memorable and therefore less likely to be forgotten in the way of protecting the trees. That's my own experience, and I know that there'll be women listening who've had really bad experiences. My heart goes out to them, and I've had a few. I've had some quite bad stuff happen to me as a woman in the past, but on the whole, it's okay. And I know that you and your business are so wonderfully inclusive and so wonderfully sensitive to everybody's needs. You're a real shining advocate of...
We need better equity across the board.
Across the board, yes.
In fact, I was thinking about this, ties into my next question to you, but if I could wave a magic wand and have equity, the same level of equity for everybody on the planet, I think I would. And that takes me to my next question for you, really, which is...
We interrupt this programme for a slight change of pace. Now, you may have heard last week there was a little mention of Sharon doing her top 30 arboricultural faves, not off. So what follows is actually now her top 30. I think she could probably have done 70 or 80 or probably 90. So stick with it, pop pickers, because here she comes.
You know, you interviewed Cecil, a proponent of 300 for trees. But if you were to apply that to making changes for the better, with the 3 being in your life, the 30 being in arboriculture, and the 300 being in society,
Oh, that's a
changes would you make?
fantastic question. The 3 things I would change in my life, Luke, I would be really good at managing money. Right, I would do that. I would be really good at managing my time, and I would be able to explore my creative projects a lot more. So I would say I'd like to put that one first, because I think that would lead to the others. I would love to spend half of my working life creatively by talking to people and by writing and talking, listening, writing. I would love that. And I think the other things would follow from that. So that's the 3 things about me. The next thing is the 30 things about arboriculture. Equity for everybody who will be attracted. Understanding that it's a job, so there will be greater number of people coming forward for employment. Greater resourcing for local authorities, more than double resourcing for staff in local authorities, including support staff. I would have, I'm going to number 5 because I will get to 30. I would have allied professions having 1 session on arboriculture as part of their educational journey. I would have arboriculture, it is partly getting there, but on the national curriculum, arboriculture and forestry on the national curriculum. I would have a soap opera with an arboriculturalist. And by the way, as an Archer's addict, we now have 2 of the characters who have started as tree surgeons, so we are getting there. So my dream is coming true on that one. So on a soap opera, I would like there to be some kind of crime drama on telly where the thing that's hurt is a tree. Who killed that tree? Now we've got to number 8. I would like there to be better PPE for people of all sexes, shapes and sizes. Number 9, I would like arboriculturalists to feel more empowered, and I'm going to say this, I'll check if I can say it or not, but this afternoon I've been on an interview panel for the excellent Claw leadership programme, which the Institute of Charter Foresters runs, interviewing candidates for that. I would like there to be more, it's just a wonderful, wonderful programme. I would like there to be more social and leadership training for arboriculturalists. Number 10, I would like arboriculturalists just to believe in themselves more and not be so browbeaten. You're blimmin' amazing. I nearly swore. Number 11, I would like trees to be planted well and properly and with investment for underground space. Number 12, I would like trees to be maintained and there to be sufficient budgets to be that dealt with. Number 13, I would like landscape architects to enjoy the full range of appropriate species and to be adventurous. Number 14, I would like those setting those budgets to think generously about the future and existing treescape. Number 15, I would like governments to recognise the importance of what we've actually got and give that a target. Number 16, I would like government to recognise the role of everybody who works in the environmental sector. Number 17, I would like the community and those who fight tirelessly for trees and for those who work in the profession to talk to each other and reach levels of understanding, and for there to be a forum to do that. Number 18, I would like there to go towards a standardisation in canopy cover assessment that we could easily do. Number 19, this is off the top of my head, I might run out in a minute. Number 19, I'd like us to have a deeper understanding of the relationship of soil and tree root health and mycorrhizae, and that would be by funding, which brings me to number 20. I want more funding for universities, for the university lecturers who are incredible, to be paid probably double. And that because there are so many people in school knowing about arboriculture, number 21, the university places are full and there's a waiting list. Number 22, I spoke to Nadina Gale a few weeks ago, and her book is amazing. And one of the things she talks about in the book is meeting a tree officer, and she had to fight through dusty corridors to a NAF office. I would like environmental officers, so it's not just tree people, to have the top glass-fronted offices because they are seen to be the most powerful people. Number, where have I got to? 23. Number 23, I would like all the brilliant work of iTree and canopy cover assessments, all of the economic value of trees to be really understood by politicians and really be implemented in terms of budget setting. Number 24. Yeah, I'm going to do it. Number 24, regulation. I would like regulation to be fair and proportionate and for it to be resourced for enforcement. So it's one thing having a big stick, it's another having people to use it appropriately. Number 25, I would like there to be a programme on telly just about tree folk so people can see its job, or a Netflix series or whatever, Amazon series or something like that, because people don't watch telly anymore. Number 26, I'd like there to be natural and safe and non-disruptive biological controls for pests and diseases. That might be impossible. Because number 27, again, there needs to be funding for research labs throughout the UK and throughout the world to be doubled so that people could properly understand, because number 28, none of this is useful if they don't talk to each other. So number 28, and this will happen,
Yep.
and I'm not going to say why, there needs to be more cross-discipline conferences. And number 29, that the joyful sharing of knowledge online for things like the John Parker Show continue and grow. And number 30, we recognise that we're all connected. The end.
Wow.
that was a
Fantastic.
stream of
What a great
consciousness.
manifesto.
But we've got no listeners now, so it don't matter, does it?
There's one.
Yeah, they are
no,
asleep.
they're asleep.
Okay,
yes.
Society, equality for all, world peace, end of all wars, and sharing into poverty and...
Brilliant. Absolutely. I totally get behind those things. Thank you for engaging
Great
with that.
question. I'm not sure you wanted such a long answer.
Well beyond my expectations. That could be the whole show.
Well, I'd say nobody's listening now anyway. It's just pure self-indulgence.
Lastly, not lastly. How do you respond to in a crisis?
God. Depends on the nature of the crisis. So External, you just asked for inner. Do you mean inner or external, or do you mean that as all in one crisis?
I'm the floor's open
Okay,
to you to explore
so,
any type of crisis.
okay, external crisis, if it doesn't push any particular buttons of mine, which I'm sensitive to, I'm actually really good. I'm clear thinking, I will take action, I'm excellent. I've got some particular buttons that are if are pushed, which are due to past traumas, that I will crumble and I will seek help. And I don't want to talk publicly about what they are, but I have sought help and it has been forthcoming. But if it's something that's just like a crisis of stress, I am really good now at recognizing when I need to stop. Meditation, I do a lot of yoga. I'm wonderfully supported by Noel and my family. And I'm very open. I reach out to people I love and trust. I'm forever grateful to them for all the love. I'm nothing without the love of the people I know.
That's wonderful. Absolutely brilliant. You have a business partnership with your husband Noel, and what are the joys and frustrations of that?
No frustrations for me, but there are frustrations for Noel. And one of them is my time management. And the fact that every time we do a podcast, he will say to me, I want you to be ready half an hour before. And I'll just leave that there because I don't need to tell you anything about that. Joyce, it's
No.
the easiest thing in the world to work with Noel. It's just we totally
Wow.
understand each other. And it's a real blessing that he puts up with me. It's not
absolutely
easy.
wonderful. Wonderful to see and hear on the podcast. Yeah, and I remember what I think I remember what I was going to ask, which is really about the community that you've fostered around you in arboriculture. I mean, I have to say that I've reached out to you on several occasions, and you've been really honest and forthcoming, and really helped me understand things or take a different perspective on something I was struggling with, and yeah, so I'd just like maybe for you to reflect a bit on that community that you've really nurtured within the profession.
Well, that actually makes me feel quite emotional because that is the most important thing to me. And there are reasons why I seek communities. And the reasons why when things don't go right, I'm deeply affected. But if I said earlier, if I could spend half my time doing creative work, and the creative work being talking to my loved ones in the community, then that is what I actually feel I should be doing. And it's a most enormous privilege when people do come to me. And they're very, 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 very welcome. Noel and I love to help people. That's made me tremor. My legs are actually shaking, which is no good for disco dancing.
As a role.
Yeah.
That's absolutely wonderful, Sharon. I really thank you so much for letting me ask you questions. I found this really quite inspirational to hear your reflections, your story, and your absolute generosity with which you've shared it.
Thank you, Luke.
So, thank you so much.
That was really interesting. And as I've probably thought already, I can't shut up. And if anybody does still happen to listen, I can only apologise. Thank you.
Wonderful.
I actually felt I came out of that quite well. I hope everybody agrees with me. This is Noel here from Tree Lady Talks. I hope you enjoyed that. It's the first time we've got into the soul of Sharon to Noel and be the Tree Lady. And next time, I don't know what's happening. I've got to be honest. I have no idea what's happening next Friday, but there will be something. Don't worry about it. And don't forget to subscribe on our new YouTube channel at Tree Lady Talks. Then you can see the video podcast of this, which is even funnier than that. Okay, not off, mate. So till next time, we will see you or hear you. You will hear us then. Bye for now.
Thank you.